So let's talk about this first dev live stream. I have all my notes here. This particular one, the first Into the Light developer live stream where they revealed part 1 of what this Into the Light update is going to be, coming on April 9th, which is 3 weeks away. I know a lot of the rampant speculation about this was that it was going to be some sort of a horde mode, and it does look like something like that is coming to the game. We have a new activity coming called Onslaught, which is, I believe they said, free to play. It's the 3-player activity where you will have to fight against waves and waves of enemies going up to level 50 on higher level difficulties. But I think there's like a 10-wave option, and then there's like a 50-wave option, and there's also like a challenge option, plus on top of that, like normal and then legendary difficulty. So there's a bunch of different difficulties. There's also some level of private matchmaking on higher difficulties. So if you just want to go in as a duo, if you want to go in by yourself, you can also do that. This is a wave defense based activity. I'm going to play the actual gameplay going here, where you're going to have lots of enemies coming towards you as you protect this thing called the ADU, which you need to throw some charges at in order to kind of charge it up, while defeating a whole bunch of enemies. And you'll be able to collect scrap along the way. Scrap is earned as a team, but you spend it individually, and you can spend it on upgrades like these turrets. You can spend it on decoys. You can spend it on trip mines. All of these can be upgraded to level 2 and level 3. They stick around as long as they're not completely destroyed. Defend the ADU. Keep it up the entire time. If it goes down at all, the run's over. So you have to keep this thing healthy by continuously throwing the batteries at it. If too many enemies attack it and it goes down, then your run is over. On higher difficulties, they said Extinguish was going to be on. So if the battery dies or your entire team dies, it's over as well. I imagine that's probably just going to be on the hardest of difficulties. I think they also said something like Extinguish activates in later waves on certain difficulties, something like that. Otherwise, there's going to be champions, there's going to be, mini ultras, mini bosses, all this kind of stuff. There's going to be different augments going on, like this one's called Sky Bombers. So there's going to be different things to kind of change up, certain waves of gameplay here and there, trying to get you away from the ADU in order to complete other objectives. As you upgrade things, they do more damage, they shoot faster, they get more HP, stuff like that. Nothing too crazy. You also have bonus objectives during certain waves, where if you complete the bonus objective, you will get a heavy ammo crate. None of these objectives really seemed that difficult in order to complete, though, at least just based on what we saw of the gameplay going on here. Then every 5 waves, so technically on like wave 6 and 16 and 26 and 36, you go into a pyramid ship for some sort of a mini boss / mini encounter type deal, and then you come back out and you continue your defense. And then on waves 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, you go back into a portal in order to take on some kind of a boss. These bosses don't have any sort of immunity shields, but they do start more tanky than usual, and then you do things within the fight in order to weaken them so that you deal more damage to them, as opposed to just like, here's an immune shield, and then you have to do a thing, and then you can damage the boss. Bosses will always be vulnerable, and instead you do things so that you do more damage. Sort of like a Gambit situation where, you get more stacks. It's not literally Gambit, but it's just that concept. And then after that, you get some loot. And then you come back out and you continue. If you're on the longer duration one, there is an option, again, just to do 10 waves. So if you just want to do the 10 waves and get out, okay, there you go. Each wave was taking about a minute, give or take. So a full run of this place, if you want to do all 50 waves, it wouldn't surprise me if you were pushing around an hour. So you have like one wave, let's say it takes 1 minute or so, then plus boss encounters, plus extra portal stuff, plus just higher difficulty. So yeah, 50 waves being about an hour sounds good to me. We didn't really talk about loot. Loot is going to be next week, but this the person playing right now is using a Midnight Coup that has Firefly, and it was kinetic tremors, right? A lot of older items are going to be returning, but Hung Jury was also dropping. They didn't really kind of go over any of the loot, though. In the gameplay, they also show that items were 1830, but I think that was just like kind of a dev environment situation. I don't think the 1830 was actually real, so I don't think there's a power increase or anything like that, so don't worry about that. And that kind of seems like the majority of what we got for today. It was mainly just showing off the gameplay. I think they got up to like wave 30 something. They confirmed no power increase. Okay. So they got up to like wave 30 something or other, and then they kind of cut it there because they were getting close to an hour. This is what you're seeing on screen right now is one of the examples of like these mini encounters where you go kill a bunch of enemies, certain enemies, and then you're going to play Rift in PvE. You're taking the spark and dunking it at the end of this little mini gauntlet here. And that's how you remove the shield. I think you just kind of kill this boss enemy outright when you dunk the spark. And you do have a limited amount of time to dunk it, but as you can see on the screen, not really going to be that hard in order to do it. They also did talk about, at the very end of the stream, a new social space that is coming. That will be revealed next week. There are going to be multiple maps, or at least more than one map. They're fighting against the Fallen right now. In this next wave, they're going to be fighting against the Hive. I don't know if they've mentioned if it's just going to be more than Fallen and the Hive, if you're going to be able to fight everything. They said Taken. Okay. So far, 3. It's got to be Old Tower, especially with the CE having the model. It wouldn't surprise me if the Old Tower did make a comeback, but it also wouldn't surprise me if it didn't. I'd imagine all but Vex. I mean, yeah. I mean, even the Vex could potentially show. I don't know. They could just make up whatever reason. They said Taken or somewhere else. Okay. It'll be the farm again. They insinuated that the Taken were going to be used for a different activity. I don't think they referred to them being an enemy at this activity. Okay. Oh yeah, Shax is also going to be kind of like a part of Into the Light. He's going to be the vendor, I believe they said. But that is, I think, the majority of what they covered during this first live stream. It's mainly gameplay, just showing off a lot of gameplay and kind of talking about the inspiration for, like, why is this happening? And, they gave some lore bits about the Witness. It's like, yeah, the Witness is, like, trying to keep us away from going into the Traveler as much as possible and blah, 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 blah. But the majority of this was pretty much gameplay. So now let's get into some thoughts. Do I think this is well within something that I was potentially expecting? Yes. I said many, many times that my expectations going into this reveal were that I was taking an aggregate of everything that we've gotten over the past 4 years in terms of quality, and whatever that average was what I was expecting with Into the Light. And I think that assessment ended up being very, very accurate. In terms of, like, difficulty, do I imagine this being a super difficult thing on, like, even on Legend for, the squad of people that I usually play with? Probably not. You guys got to remember that if something like this looks super, super easy to you, that you are still absolutely within the top range of players who play this game. I think this is well within range for what I was kind of expecting as someone who wasn't going in with any sort of expectations whatsoever. And I know, like, a horde mode type thing is something that people have been asking a very long time for. I think because it is their first time doing some sort of horde mode based thing, they, went a little light on stuff. I would love to see more roguelite type mechanics come to this, where, like, maybe, every wave, it's not just like a flat 3 different kind of upgrades. This is more feeling like proof of concept type stuff, where it's like, okay, it's our first time doing wave based thing like this. Let's try this out. And then after we try it out, we see how it flows. Then we can add more to it, which I hope they do. A lot of questions on whether or not this is going to stick around after the final shape comes out. I don't know if they mentioned that specifically. I don't know if they talked about that at all. I would assume that some form of this would stick around, even if, like, lore-wise, it doesn't really make the most amount of sense. But I would hope that something like that would stick around, at least for, like, a little bit. Or, they keep it around until they come out with a version that's a bit more, like, lore-neutral, where it's like the implication is not, we're right before the final shape, and then they have to get rid of it for, like, lore reasons or whatever. But something like this, I hope, would make it to the game in a more permanent way, sort of like the roguelite stuff, like sort of like the coil and sort of like deep dive, where, you know, we have more of these kind of things core to the game and they're not just this kind of one-off experience that we aren't going to get to see again. I think feedback from, at least from my chat, has been pretty all over the place. A lot of people are like, this looks really neat. A lot of people being like, LOL, no new enemies. And like, those people, I don't know how to talk to you anymore because we've been doing this for like a decade now. Endless Waves with Libra. Yeah, I would love that. You know, I would love for Bungie to like keep scaling these things up. You know, so far we've been getting tastes of, you know, like, here's a taste of this kind of activity, and here's a taste of this kind of activity, and here's a taste of this kind of activity. And like something like this with like, you just go as long as you can and you just try to get to the maximum wave possible. I would love something like that, right? Now, I've been seeing a lot of this commentary of, it's free, why are you complaining? Something that is free does not mean it is immune to criticism. Just because it's free doesn't mean you get to be like, oh, it doesn't matter how good or bad it is if it's free. You can still give an opinion. It's just the opinion should be more than this looks like garbage or this is crap or something like that. Actual feedback is fine, but just saying like, this is stupid, I hate it, is like, that's not feedback at all. But this is well within the realm of like, you know, seasonal activity type thing. And again, to anyone, I want to know why, you know, I definitely want feedback on like why people think it looks disappointing or anything like that. Did you maybe hype it up a little too much for yourself? Were you going in with no expectations? Because again, as someone who went in with no expectations pretty much at all and was just kind of assuming we would get another thing similar to the things that we've gotten in the past, sort of like maybe like a 30th anniversary. That was, I think, the closest comparison I could make was a 30th anniversary type thing. Jesus Christ. People are disappointed that it's using Crucible maps and not some new bombastic huge map. I can understand being in a space that you've already kind of been in before. I can totally understand that. Even if they did make some, you know, pyramid ship-esque adjustments, something like that doesn't really bother me too much, but I can totally understand that. Went in low expectation. I'm so tired of seeing the same feeling seasonal content. Maybe if they had some road-like mechanics like you were talking about. Yeah, I think something like that to keep zhuzhing it up is going to be something definitely that I want to see going into the future from an activity like this. I think they made a mistake going for a 3-stream reveal. I mean, I don't necessarily think it's a big mistake because, again, you guys got to understand, if you're watching on Twitch, you're super active on Twitch, even then, like, you're at peak familiarity with the game, and something like this, you have to understand, has to appeal to a much wider range of people than like people who play the game all the time. You know, something like this to us might look still kind of easy and like probably not going to struggle with it too much, but to the average person is not going 50 rounds. They ain't doing that, I'll tell you that much. Seems like tower defense with the old Halo firefight kind of thing. I'm definitely casual, so I'm happy with it. Yeah. That's me. Any 10-year player just sees seasonal content. I mean, I have very similar vibes, right? This is still, it is seasonal content vibes, but I wasn't expecting it to be more than seasonal content vibes, especially because we don't really know the background of its development. Like, how quickly did something like this come together? You know, how much time did they have to create something like this? Was it something they had to just be like, oh crap, we need something? Or was this something that they've been working on for a very long time? I think that also, but again, it is not your job to care about the plight of game development. I understand that. Initial encounter map of Scourge would have been so much better than Midtown. That's fair. It's probably a little bit bigger of a space than maybe they wanted to use, though. Like, I'm thinking about the opening encounter of Scourge. That's a big area compared to something like Midtown, which is much, much smaller. You mentioned the people who were playing it had been working on it for months. Okay. I know I like to mention this a lot, but the number one piece of feedback that I've gotten from Bungie recently is that if you have a build and know how to play your build or multiple builds, you just absolutely crush this game. Whereas if you don't have builds or you don't do any sort of build crafting or don't engage in that world, this game absolutely annihilates you. And as someone who you know, pretty much knows what they're doing across all aspects of this game in PvE. I would love to see more things that challenge the people who are more in tune with build crafting. You know, I want something that's going to challenge me as someone who knows the game at an incredibly high level, but I also understand and have kind of given up on this point of expecting content like that when I am an incredible minority in that aspect. How are they going to make Hung Jury worth getting for the 4th time? So I think the reason why something like Hung Jury is here is because, you know, I assume there's going to be a lot of fan favorite weapons showing up in the rewards live stream next week. You know, it's like why Midnight Coup's here. It's why Hung Jury has been a fan favorite. Maybe it was more like Destiny 1. It was kind of a fan favorite. I don't know how much of a fan favorite it is in Destiny 2, but that's why there's been talks of like other older weapons making a return and all that kind of stuff. So it feels more of like a kind of celebration of those things that haven't come back yet, as opposed to like, we're bringing back Hung Jury for the 4th time. It's more like, this is nostalgia. It's all nostalgia stuff. Yeah, I mean, it is yet another thing where I'm like, okay, cool. The next time I see this, I want it to be even more in depth. I want there to be even more, you know, elements to it. I want like the roguelite stuff. I want more upgrades. I want maybe a little more randomness, stuff to kind of keep me on my toes. But I know that as the high level player that I am, and I'm sure many of you are as well, Bungie does need to keep it in perspective of, you know, who the overall player base, right? So my only wish is that hopefully they get to a point in development where they can start adding in those like higher and higher and higher level things for the people like myself, perhaps like a lot of like y'all, where we want it to go even further beyond. But also, are we ever gonna reach a point where things maybe don't feel like seasonal activities outside of campaigns? You know, with considering how far Bungie is able to push a lot of the things in their game, right? I've said it before many times where Bungie like has an upper limit on how difficult they can make certain things because they need to keep things accessible for as wide of an audience as possible. They said there will be a GM level difficulty to it. I heard something like it will eventually scale up to it, but maybe I misinterpreted while I was writing down notes. I could have easily messed that up. Yeah, I would absolutely love to try a solo 50 wave kind of situation. You gotta figure the average player is of the skill level of a random blueberry you get match made with in a seasonal activity that doesn't know what gear mods are and runs 20 resilience and dies 50 times. It's got to be playable for them too. Yes, exactly. Which is why we don't get a lot of these like super, super complex things. Again, people complain about like armor mods all the time. Like, why did they get rid of armor mods? Why did they dumb everything down? They dumbed everything down because so many people weren't playing with them because they didn't understand them. Right? I see it all the time on Reddit. Like, bro, build crafting is dead, bro. And it's like, well, they made it more accessible to people who just don't understand words. I'll definitely engage with this. You know, I want to see how tough it actually gets. Maybe I'm wrong. And the super hard mode is actually super hard. It's FU hard. And I'm pleasantly surprised. You know, I try to keep that expectation in check because rarely is something released into the game so difficult that it is completely undoable. So I would love to be pleasantly surprised there, but I think overall this is well within the zero expectations that I had going in because I just didn't want to hype myself up too much for a thing where I know Bungie marketing go burr, but then sometimes Bungie in-game not always going so burr. You know what I mean? I think it's gonna be like Coil, but a tad harder. I would agree with that assessment. Yeah. I don't think the Coil final tier is super difficult, at least in a team, you know, or at least the people that I play with, right? Over under on duping the batteries. I mean, you really need to dupe the freaking batteries, bro. But all that being said, still is a free update. You don't have to engage with it if you don't want to. You don't have to pay for it. 6-player would have been cool. I think that maybe would have been outside the game's actual budget, and I'm not talking monetarily, I'm talking like memory capabilities and just like physically being able to have not only 6 players in the game but also have enough things spawning in that it's still actually somewhat of a challenge. I would much rather have a 3-player thing that feeds my enemy density appetite than a 6-player thing that does not. I absolutely think that fatigue is a part of why some people feel like, oh, this is, boring, lame. It's just like, it's more fighting aliens. That's what the game is, man. I'm not saying that's the only reason, but definitely there are some people who are just fatigued with the game. That's it. Until proven otherwise, this is what it is, right? What is this? What is this thing right here? Season 5. It's Season of the Forge. We're throwing balls into forges. We're dunking rifts. Overall, I mean, like, I'm going to play it. I'm going to enjoy it for as long as I can. And then when it starts to get, exhausting. Not exhausting is maybe not the right word. But, like, when I'm done with it, when I have all the things, I'm going to be done with it. And that's it. I will play it until it's not fun anymore. And then that'll be it. I think now, after Final Shape, Bungie is going to need to start exploring. Oh, big stretch, buddy. Bungie's going to need to start exploring more of the things that they've been experimenting with this year in order to shake things up. That's what they're going to need to do. Or maybe they don't do that at all because their data shows like, oh, the more we try to make things more complex or shake things up, the less people play it because they just don't understand what the hell is happening. There's also 2 more live streams with more content that we haven't seen yet. Well, I mean, next week is just going to be rewards, or that seems like it's going to be rewards and perhaps more of that social space that they were talking about. The third one, I'm not sure. I will play it, I will enjoy it, and then I will be done with it. And that's kind of how I feel about it. But that's how I felt about most things over the past couple of years.